Welcome to the Career Slay podcast, the show where we interview people who love their jobs and discuss career growth, fearless leadership, and creating a life you love. I'm your host, Kelly Poquiz Burke, a marketer turned executive coach, and I'm here to help you lead with courage and slay the fear in career. If you're a fan of these conversations and want to dive deeper into your own career and leadership questions, book a coaching discovery call with me at careerslay.com. Neha Ruch is the founder of Mother Untitled, the leading platform for ambitious women leaning into family life. A thought leader, influencer, and sought-after speaker focusing on women, work, parenting, and identity, Neha's work at Mother Untitled is catalyzing a shift in how society views stay-at-home motherhood. Her USA Today bestseller, The Power Pause: How to Plan a Career Break After Kids and Come Back Stronger Than Ever, published with Putnam in January 2025. Neha lives in Manhattan with her husband, their 2 children, and their dog, Coconut. Talking with Neha was such a gift. Her story and the way she reframes career pauses as power pauses was so inspiring. I had found her work and community at Mother Untitled at the exact moment I needed it in my own life. It was like hearing someone articulate the exact things I felt, but couldn't quite put into words when I stepped off the corporate treadmill. Neha's message that ambition doesn't disappear, it just evolves, really stuck with me. She's not just rewriting the narrative for women who take career breaks. She's building a movement of ambitious, empowered women and is giving us the language, the tools, and most importantly, the permission to define success on our own terms. I'm so grateful for her voice, her vulnerability, and her trailblazing work. Neha, welcome to Career Slay. It's so exciting to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We met at a conference, I think it was about a year ago, and I remember just absolutely fangirling over you because when I started my career break, it was around the same time that the Mother Untitled content started showing up in my feed. It's like the universe knew that it needed to bring us together. So wanted to just really have this deeper conversation about your book, Power Pause, what it means to take a career break, and really just dive in. But let's start at the beginning. What was your childhood like, and what were you like as a kid?
Oh, I love that question. I immigrated here when I was 3. I immigrated to a small town outside of Boston, and this actually becomes relevant later on. But, my dad was building a tech company at the time, and my mom was mostly at home. She would take the bus with me to our little elementary school, and she was our school librarian, and she was the ESL teacher, and all volunteer. And then eventually she went back to work when I was 11 part-time. I was definitely sort of in the thick of my dad's entrepreneurial journey. And we would spend a lot of our weekends entertaining and building the community around his work. But I was always looking for a sense of belonging in that town. It's ironic because some of my closest friends, I have a group of 8 girlfriends, and they're all from home. So I can say nothing bad about that town. But it was as someone who looked different than everyone else, I was always sort of searching. And I ended up, I think it sort of came to a head my senior year of high school, which was just tricky for me. And I decided to take a gap year between high school and college. And that was before we called it a gap year, right? Mm-hmm. So I just deferred, and I went back to India, and I had this feeling, this deep knowing that if I stepped away from this town and I went somewhere where people looked like me, and maybe I could feel a little bit more comfortable in my skin, and I would figure out what really mattered.
Wow, that's powerful. And that was your first power pause almost.
Correct. Right. Which is why this is all somewhat full circle.
Wow, that's incredible. So when you came back from India, what did you study?
I went to a school called Skidmore, a college called Skidmore in upstate New York in Saratoga Springs. I graduated in 3 years, and I did a self-determined major, which is probably sort of in line with all of this. They allow you the room to go and put together a proposal for a different way to make it work. And my proposal was communications with a concentration on media and women.
I love that. Just entrepreneurial through and through, making your own major. That's amazing. So what was your first job out of college? Tell us some of the key roles and responsibilities that you held in your career.
After college, I had an opportunity to join 2 different kinds of agencies. One was larger and one was really tiny. It was a small boutique social media agency. And my dad said, I think social media is hot right now. And if you can get your foot in the door there and make a name for yourself there, it'll open up more opportunities. And he was totally right. I was, 22 years old. Twitter wasn't even born yet. And they said to me, we want to do two things. We want to get in front of the mom bloggers, which is ironic, right? So that was my
Yes.
first key, was finding a way to introduce our product in a compelling way to the mom blogosphere. So I was spending time on Deuce, if you remember her, Heather Armstrong's blog, and really just getting away and understanding of that world. And then the other thing that they wanted to do was figure out how to use Twitter, which was pretty nascent,
Mhm.
and forums to learn more about positioning, how better to position our product. So it was a lot about listening. And I actually came up with a product, which I was calling a social listening product at the time, and sort of a methodology. And so because I had that at a very young age, I ended up being hired into the agency that had first offered, that larger agency, but in a much bigger role, right? I was the second hire in their digital strategy function. And because of that, sort of right time, right place, I accelerated pretty quickly in that agency. And I think I got to, a lot of that, I was assigned the women in healthcare beat. So that function was like our retail arm. So I focused a lot on motherhood and millennials. So CVS and TJ Maxx and TJX companies were my key client, Johnson and Johnson. There's a lot that sort of, you look back and the dots always make sense. They don't at that time. I had a lot of fun there. I learned a lot. My real function was consumer insights. So I loved figuring out a way to merge secondary research as well as like focus groups and social listening to put together a real portrait of like who these women were and how we could create like real resonance with them. And I loved it, but I didn't love the politics. And once you get to a certain level and you're too young for that level, right? So I was
Mhm.
in a lot of rooms that I was really the youngest person, and I didn't feel equipped to manage through the politics of it. And I wanted a reset, and someone described business school, which is not like a typical choice from advertising.
Mhm.
Describe business school as a train stop to surround yourself with smart people and figure out what comes next. So I applied only to two schools. I applied to NYU and Stanford, and I chose Stanford because it felt the most entrepreneurial. It felt the most accepting to someone who didn't come from consulting or finance, and it delivered. It was a really special place.
There are so many similarities in our path because I started out in advertising too. I was I was the one, researching millennial moms and selling in Twitter to my clients, and then I went to business school because I wanted to gain that business acumen and be seen as a leader and like level up. And so, what did you do after business school? Like, what did that catapult you into?
So it's interesting. I was on the older side when I got to business school, and I wasn't so old. I was 29, 28, 29 during my years there, and just like slightly older than the average, which I think is like usually 25. So people have usually come into it just like a few years. And the reason it was relevant was I was already engaged at business school. So it sort of changed my relationship to school, where I was really already thinking about, well, where are we going to build our family? Where are we going to, so that really shaped. And we decided on New York because we have family there. And I knew I wanted to take the through line of brand marketing, but I wanted to not go back to the agency world. And I ended up taking a role running tech at a startup called Zola, which was in the registry space. And I think a
Yes.
lot of that aligned with the same journey I was walking at the time. And on paper, it was my dream job. It really was. There was a counterpart that was really on more of the acquisition marketing side, and I was purely on the storytelling side. And because we were so small back then, I really had carte blanche to, figure out how to position it as really specific to the millennial bride, figure out how to gain without necessarily having a product, gain that press. And so it got me into like editorial, which I'd always wanted to be in. And so it was really a wonderful job on paper.
Yeah.
except you can't escape politics.
Hmm.
And everyone has to figure out where their stress comes from. And mine really did come not from hours spent on work, but really on headspace. I'm sort of like I can absorb people's energy, and I think that was definitely the case in my work environment.
Yeah. I was reading in your book that you made an abrupt decision to leave that job and then you did consulting. So tell us more about what was the impetus for deciding to make a pivot.
Yeah, I think it was really that. It was was trying to get pregnant at the time, and I was at a moment of not wanting to come home at the end of the day feeling fraught
Mhm.
by tensions that were happening in the workplace. I wanted to come home with a clear head and clear heart, and I wanted that autonomy because of some of the partnerships I was brokering within my role. I was offered a role before I left as a head of brand, but it would be more fractional. And I think that that gave me this cushion of, if you're in a contract position, consulting head of brand, there's a little bit of an emotional separation. And that felt right for me during that sort of season of pregnancy and getting ready for that next step. The role was, I moved into carrots and cake, which was just also, when you're not VC funded, it's just a change of pace, right? It was going from being like a 40-person company to a 5-person company without VC funding. The goals are different. And so
Mhm.
the pace is different. And it just felt like I was already leaning towards a space where I could be creative with less stress.
That's amazing. And you were ahead of your time because I feel like fractional
Oh, I know. I always
jobs,
say that.
yeah, fractional jobs are the thing right now. So, what
Yeah.
inspired you to start Mother Untitled?
Mm. Well, I had my first son, and I was working for a female boss who was just so understanding and so supportive. And we decided on a 4-month maternity. I was going to take 4 months off. And when you are consulting or you're freelancing or you're contract, even if you're working 4 days a week, you make a trade-off. And I was lucky to have insurance for my husband and not need the maternity leave. So I just want to be clear that as I was making those shifts, they're always calculated, right? I don't want to glorify freelance and fractional work, because I think it's important to know that going in. And I had Bodhi, and I asked for an extra month. And then, as I was like sitting in that last month, right, I was rocking with him and thinking, and this is where it goes back to sort of that 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 7-year-old senior in high school where I was looking for belonging. I was with him thinking, oh my God, I finally belong. I think my career had given me a lot of that for a while, a lot of worth, a lot of sense of like, I have a space in this room. But there was still, like, when we talk about politics, I think the people who are most affected by it, at least I can speak for myself, are the people who are most insecure about their sense of place and belonging. And then I had him, and there was something so peaceful that I'd been looking for probably for a long time. And I decided I wanted to downshift initially. So I decided to go back to the role I was in, and I ended up going back at 5 months, 2 days a week. And I initially downshifted, and I would eventually fully pause maybe a year and a half later. But I started the thesis of Mother Untitled over those first months at home with him, because a couple things were happening. As soon as I announced I was going to downshift and take my foot off the gas, I started hearing, well, are you giving up? Are you going to be bored all day when you're at home with him? Did you waste that spot at business school? And of course, that sort of brought up that feeling of like, oh no, they don't understand and they don't improve. And that ends up being, by the way, a muscle you're going to flex over and over again in motherhood, right? Like having to make a
Mhm.
decision that is right for you and your child, but like often is looked down upon by other people, right? And so it was my first experience of that. And I'm glad I had it, because I think it sort of continues to challenge you. But meanwhile, I was feeling pretty clear. I think a lot of that is, I did not see this as a full like career ender. I really did see this like business school as a train stop to surround myself with smart people and figure out what came next. And I was meeting a lot of people. So I was doing a lot of baby groups and play spaces. I happened to live in a building where there were 6 other moms who had had kids around the same age, and they were all so accomplished. They were having kids
Mhm.
later, so they had really interesting careers. They had self-trust, so they were either downshifting themselves, or they were, figuring out boundaries in their workforce, or they were fully pausing, but they trusted that they were returning, and they were keeping themselves so creative and connected. And I thought, like, well, this doesn't match the perception And so then I started to peel back the layers as to, well, where is the perception coming from? And I was looking around thinking, oh, wow, there's so much great content about the working mother. Well, what about women
Yeah.
who are choosing to pause or shift? And oh, wow, there is no content about that. And that's why everyone thinks I'm going to be bored all day, because basically there was Lean In and Girl Boss, which was also like at its boom when I had my first child. Or there were like a very domesticated image of what stay-at-home motherhood looked like that was really left over from like 1950s portraits.
June
And that
Cleaver.
power chasm just didn't fit. And so I started Mother Untitled with the exact same mission to change the narrative about women making room for family life. But obviously the irony of that is when you're starting a platform about women on career pauses, while you're on a career pauses, you have to do it in a small way. And mine was on, a free blog and Instagram. And it was started with profiling women who were changing the perception for me.
Wow, that's powerful. There's so much there. And I think I grew up with the lean in narrative where it's like, you have to have your seat at the table. Like everything is possible. Like you can have everything. Right. And I think when I got there, when I got to that point of becoming a mother and realizing that, oh no, there are trade offs and my heart is also tugging me in a different direction. What do I do now? And so when I found your content, I was telling my husband, I was like, this is me. I'm like liking every post. I'm sharing every post. People were like, what is this content that you're sharing? And it just happened to find me at the moment that I needed it the most. So thank you so much. So many of us fear stepping off of that career treadmill. I remember when I quit my job, it was scarier than getting my breast cancer diagnosis. What gave you the courage to hit pause, and what surprised you the most during that time?
Wow, that is so powerful that our career identities have as much weight as our health, right? Like and I think that's because we live in a culture that associates what do you do with who are you.
Yeah.
And often our answer to that has rolled off our tongue for so long, right? I run brand at a tech startup. Well, now I've conveyed I'm in a leadership position. I am creative, tech startup, like I'm a little ahead of the curve. Meanwhile, that's not actually what my identity is, but it's a nice way of which to allow myself space and allow myself to be seen and respected. And I think one of the biggest fears for women is, well, what am I going to answer to that question, right? Because stay-at-home mom, and I think that was the biggest surprise, is like that first time someone asked, I word vomited. And that's why the first chapter in the book is really about how do you create language that allows you to walk through the stage of life with confidence, because you realize you still deserve to be seen for being ambitious, for being feminist, for all of these things that seem to evaporate if you say stay-at-home mom. And the research checks out that we commissioned a survey called American Mothers on Pause. If you ask the American public who they think of as a stay-at-home mom, they say June Cleaver, who's a fictional character from the 1950s. If you ask them about a working mother, they say Michelle Obama. One is fact, one is fiction, and the power chasm is so wide. And to see that was really, and witness it, and to feel not only was it hard to be asked what do you do and not have an answer, but to not be asked at all, right? Because people would kind of guess just by what I was wearing or what I was doing that like I was at home with my kids. And in doing so, they kind of felt like I was suddenly invisible. That work was about, well, how can I re-architect my sense of ambition, my sense of feminism? And for me, that was about research, right? So I literally went to the dictionary to look up the definition of ambition, and it was the determination to do things with no clarification as to like what things.
Yeah.
And I realized, well, of course, we're going to do a lot of different things over the long game of life. And of course, like maybe ambition is really holding that platter of priorities and shifting our time and energy of focus, but doing it with both intention, with value alignment, and with a real self-trust. I wanted answers in language that gave me that. And so for me, it was right now. Like I had to practice. How do I respond to what do you do? It was right now. I get to be with my kids. We'll see what comes next. Being able to signal to the world and myself that this is one chapter. And I think from a feminist perspective, a lot of it was rewriting, like going back to the drawing board and thinking, well, how did we get here? And it was, second wave feminism peaked in the 1970s. And it was really to prove our capacity in the workforce at the exact same time as media was taking off. And so media loves a cat fight. And so they loved pitting stay-at-home and working
Mhm.
moms against each other. And then the stay-at-home mom got riddled with this sort of fictional character that was beaming into living rooms around that time, right? So you
Mhm.
hence the Leave It to Beaver. And we just never updated the perception. And so I almost had to collect data. And that's of like real examples of real women of like, wait a second, we're having children a lot later than our counterparts, which means we're not tripping and falling into motherhood and domesticity. We're coming in with a lot of work experience. Our partners are 3 times as engaged with their children than any generation before. So we're not like serving them cocktails at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And the rise of freelance entrepreneurship, flex work is so large, and digital tools and technologies that we're just looking at a rewrite of all of it. And so, it was redefining feminism as like that wave was so important. And now we need to make work for us.
Yeah, that's incredible. And there's so much there. I think the fact that people thought that it was June Cleaver was the iconic mom and then versus Michelle Obama, that's just mind-blowing. Let's talk about your book, Power Pause. What exactly is a power pause? How would you define that and what inspired you to write the book?
Mm. A power pause is a reframing of that stay-at-home character. And the definition, in more simple terms than I offer in the book, is this idea that if we are shifting away from paid work, shifting away our time, our focus, our energy to make room for family life, where we can actually also be making room to explore new interests, our sense of self, our networks, so that when and if we decide to return to the paid workforce, we're actually coming back with that renewed sense of power. And the reason for the book is because for so long, women have been counted out if they choose to shift to family life, right? We even use words like opt out, drop out, fall out of the workforce. When in reality, if we can reframe it as a really intentional move to do really important work that also allows us to grow, then women have more options on the other side, right? Then we can change the paradigms that it's never to say a pause is the right choice, but it is to say it is another valid choice. And if you choose to do it, there will be more respect and support paid to that decision. But it really starts first with allowing women the language and the tools to reclaim it ourselves. And that's what the book is. And why I wrote it was because when I was walking through the stage of life myself, I felt like, oh, wow, there's so much great content around raising children or returning to the workforce, but nothing about raising ourselves alongside our kids and reclaiming, and rebranding stay-at-home motherhood for myself. And so that's what compelled me to write it.
I love that. You say that ambition doesn't go away during a pause, it evolves. Can you speak to what that evolution might look like?
Hmm. I think the foundational piece, right? Once you've gotten through making this decision carefully, then the next piece is like getting your footing in this day to day in this new stage. And it's very easy to fall into the trap of, well, I've made room for family life, and now my success and ambition is fully channeled through my children and my home. And we saw it in the research, right? For top 3 success metrics, women at home will say is how well behaved my kids are, how happy they are, and how happy my marriage is, right? And then way down low is your own mental and physical health. And I think that's one of the big shifts the book offers is saying, well, if you're taking this time, you're also taking this time for you. And so
Yeah.
how might we define success and ambition for ourselves during this time? There's many ways in which to do it, but it starts with deciding and permitting yourself to grow, right? Saying this is going to be a stage of life. I'm going to make sure that I have goals because goals dignify this time for myself.
Mhm.
And then the question is, well, how do you get to those goals? And there's, like I said, plenty of inroads onto that, but I often offer write in great detail where you want to be in 5 years, who you want to be spending time with, what you want to be spending time on, how you feel in your body, how you feel in your mind, what the energy in your house feels like, not because you're going to be that person tomorrow, but because it's going to reveal to you your most authentic version of success. Like when
Yeah.
no one's giving you, a checklist of like achieve these clients and you will get this pay bump, right? This is your most, you're not going through some like sycophantic exercise. This is like your true version. And then you can break it into three buckets: personal, professional, and family. And the goal isn't to have big, elaborate goals. It's to say, I'm moving myself forward intentionally. So I'll give you my example. When I first did this, when I had a 3 and 1 year old at home, and I wrote that, 5-year vision, and it revealed that I wanted on a personal level to work on my patience. On a professional level, I wanted to explore writing more. And on a family level, I wanted like a silly, light feeling house. So the measurable ways I could achieve that and feel like I was moving forward in that season on a personal level, it was listen to a podcast once a week on anger and women and emotion or communication. On a professional level, it was 3 blog posts a week on women in work, which were obviously the seeds that led to this.
Mhm.
And on a family level, it was like have a dance party every single Monday. So you can see how these were really small, but
Yeah.
they made me feel like the stage of life wasn't happening to me. I was moving
Yeah.
toward a direction. And obviously, as my kids got older and they went to school and I had more childcare, then I was, obviously expanding what was possible. But I do think this is a way in which women can realize that they can grow in new directions.
Yeah, I remember taking my own career pause. And before I left my job, I decided to make 5 goals to keep me accountable for this time period. The first was I wanted to redefine my identity beyond my career. The second was wanting to be in a healthy state of mind, body, and spirit. Third was becoming a more present parent and partner. Fourth was writing a book and starting Career Slay. And fifth was to travel. And it was like, if I were to even just make like a dent in any one of these things, even just take care of my health, even just exercise every single day, I would have thought that this was worth it.
Yeah, it's a way in which you also are able to carve out time for yourself, right? Like a big part of
Yeah.
this in some of this sort of subsequent chapters, once you've sort of established this stage of life is also for me, then it sort of becomes the lens or filter you might take to the rhythms that you have in your day to day, or how much help you permit yourself and
Mhm.
support you permit yourself to get. Even when we didn't have paid childcare, because I wanted to do those 3 blog posts a week, right? Or listen to
Mhm.
that podcast, it became you partner who's working out of the home and depending on me to do all of this care work are also still like expected to provide care and support so that I can be my healthy and whole version. And how might you do that? And, at that time it was, he woke up every single morning with those kids from like, they were early risers, still are, but it was like 6 to 7:30. He was with the kids so that I could get that whole hour and a half, right? Which might seem small, but that was what was available. And then when
Mhm.
it became, okay, I want 3 afternoons of a babysitter's help, like with that, it was all through the lens of I deserve to be whole and healthy because we both deserve to be whole and healthy. And no one should work 24/7 without breaks. But also, this stage of life is for me to grow and thrive too. And with that filter, then I know I need to do this many things over the course of this week. That was an ongoing dialogue between me and my partner as to how I was able to achieve what I needed and he was able to achieve what he needed. Or in other cases, and I talk about this in the rhythms chapter, it was also about letting go of like, if we're not going to have as much childcare and or we're, any like whatever it is, you still can't do all the things.
Mhm.
And stay-at-home moms can't be super moms. Like they still can't do all that. They definitely can't. So which parts was I going to let drop? And so, yes, my husband woke up in the mornings or we had 2 afternoons of a babysitter, but like you still needed more time. And the time was found by saying, I'm not going to clean the house until the end of the day when he comes home and we can clean together. So like, I'm not going to fuss about that. And I'm not going to fuss about food. We're going to do some frozen foods. We're going to do takeout so that I can use naps and night times for myself and for this like project that I was building in the fringe hours of family life. And so, I think that's an important call out because we as women, I think when we step into a shift for family, we think we're like suddenly not worth, or we have to do all of the things to prove our worth in this
Yeah,
new
that we
role.
deserve it.
Yeah, we deserve it. And also, the only way to approach this from a strategic way to preserve your options on the other side is to carve out that space for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talk about the long game and how a pause can actually be a strategic move for long-term career growth. And you started the blog just, with 3 blog posts a week. How did it go from that into
Mm.
full-fledged platform book? I'm seeing you on like Drew Barrymore. Like
Yeah.
it's wild. Like, so how does a pause fit into that longer term career growth?
Yeah. First of all, let me say that was 9 years, right? It didn't happen overnight. I often will show on Instagram, like my phone will give me a on this day because I was so in it 6 years ago, like so in it. So like, sometimes I have to do that to myself, this like moment of like, I can't believe I'm here and I was there. Other people's paths are going to look different, but for me, I would say, and I think this is a shared commonality for so many women walking through this stage, is a couple things happen. The myths that we've been fed are that your network's going to dry up and your interests are going to wilt. And that's why that last section of the book is really about unlocking the possibility, because it's rewriting that trope. And there are ways in which to be strategic about cultivating your network and cultivating your interests to be either a launch pad for something on the other side or planting seeds for something like I did. And from a networking perspective, I'll share a couple examples from the community. There was a woman I interviewed for the book who, was feeling lost in her like new at-home parenthood chapter, as well as lost because she was in a new community. They'd relocated from San Francisco. And she was really strategic about friendship. She said, like, I'm not an extrovert, so I'm going to sit on these sidelines. And when I see a super connector, I'm going to gravitate to them. And I may say yes to the opportunities they offer. And so she did that. And someone invited her to a book club. And the second thing she did was she was vulnerable about what she needed. And in that time, she said, I'm just feeling a bit lost work wise. And someone else said, me too. And every Wednesday for 2 years, they had something called a backyard burrito session for 1 hour. And they were essentially accountability partners and sounding boards for one another in thinking through and talking through what came next. Someone else said, I had just resigned from teaching because it was hard to like be paid what I was paid and be at home with my kids and wanting to be spending that time with my kids as opposed to, and yet she was missing that piece. And so she started talking about it to the people she was meeting. And someone said, well, I'm building this nonprofit that has to do with kids. I'd love your advice and guidance. And there's opportunities in our communities that, motherhood gets this rap of being lonely because there are lonely moments, but there are also these sort of invisible threads that happen and easy layups from like a talking, small talk, right? Like who's your pediatrician? Nice diaper bag. And it can very quickly lay foundations for what starts as relationships, but does become networking. And sometimes it's more just a comrade in like talking through the parenting piece. But these friendships can spark new ideas and new interests. I'm sure you see this in the women you work with, that when women are
Mhm.
returning, they will often go to their friends first, right? And so building that slowly is important. The women that I was meeting were inspiring my work with Mother Untitled, their stories. So
Mhm.
they are often, if you go way back to my early blog posts, they were the women I posted about. Their stories. They were the first people who like participated in on my Instagram, right? Because these were the people who could like understand it. I'd always wanted to write, but I'd never found room to do that in my previous roles. And once you've checked the ego at the door, it gives you permission to explore. And for me, that was start a blog, right? And it was 3 times a week. And you asked how did it get from there to here? And so I'll just say I had to really be clear about what success was year over year because it didn't look impressive. Um,
Mhm.
I had to tune out a lot of noise. I think women's projects are often diminished, right? Like little blog, little Instagram thing, like side hustle. And so we're written off, but you have to sort of take yourself seriously and know that even if it's not making money, it can be leading to somewhere else. And I had to really be explicit about that. And so for me, it'll allow me to network. It'll allow me to have a little bit of impact. and it'll allow me to learn about social media, which I still loved. And so it did help me keep going and keep taking it seriously. And the way I grew from 2017 to 2018 was that I featured someone every week and I had them share the mission with other women. And then I grew, but then I almost paused within a pause when I had my second child, which just disrupted everything again. And in 2018, so say I'd gotten to like, this is so silly, but I'd gotten to 10,000 followers or 12,000 followers. From 2018 to 2021, I stayed at the exact same number. And I just kept the lights on. I still did the exact same things. I wrote 3 blog posts. I took it really seriously. I sent my Sunday newsletter. I posted on Instagram, but we didn't grow. But I kept the loyal. What was one of the most wonderful things was I was on my book tour. Women were like, I followed you in 2018, right? Like still people who showed up 9 years later or however many. And then in 2021, I had been talking about this for so long that I had enough of a network around me that enough of a thesis. I'd sort of overthought this topic for so long that I had my thesis and I stepped into more like, oh, my kids are into school. I can change the pacing at which I'm posting. I can level up how I'm talking about this. And at that point, it grew. I think we doubled every year. Everything sort of grew from there. I think I switched to much more thought leadership as opposed to like my lived experience. And so that just collided with Instagram optimizing for shareability. And so, it was like they were saying, oh, this is sharing really well. And I was still the only person talking about this. So when Oprah Daily needed to write a piece, they interviewed me. And that woman ended up connecting me to my agent, who ended up putting the book deal in front of, who ended up working with me on my proposal. But all of it was about, this idea that you can find what interests you, lay little seeds for it, and maybe it doesn't blossom right there, but it will lead you to these other things. And for some people, if it's not like, oh, I have this thing I care deeply about, or this thing I've always wanted to try, a lot of women I spoke to were volunteering because that was like strategic volunteering allowed them to sort of test like, oh, I'm interested in this or I'm interested in that. They were taking self-development classes on masterclass. If I say one last thing, this can be a time of serious self-study. So take an iPhone notes app or Google Doc and like write in great detail, not great detail, but like all these little bullets of what lit you up that day. Like a little bullet of like, oh, I felt really proud when I did this. Or I listened to that podcast and it sparked this idea. Because what happens is when you look back, those dots will tend to reveal some ideas about what comes next.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you broke down that it was a 9-year span to get you from point A to point B, because I think social media makes it seem like, oh, you're an overnight success, or they oversimplify the process. But what I'm hearing from you is just this idea of life-work alignment. You were fitting work into the spaces where you had time to do it, but you were still prioritizing what mattered most, which was your family. And because you were doing that, it took a lot longer to get to where you are today. But because you were so disciplined and consistent, your audience followed you and grew with you through that season.
So well said. Yeah.
How would you define success today?
I think it's defined as self-trust, as the ability to feel so confident in my priorities and my values and what I'm capable of and my capacity, that I can dial up or dial down and work on things of real meaning alongside family.
Yeah. I've seen you post recently about many people asking you about what's next after the book, right? And that's just so hustle culture right, exactly. To be like, you freaking launched a book. Isn't that enough for people?
Well, and I think the other piece is that the book for me was like one thing, like to me, this was about culture change. Like it is a political campaign. I'm still running it. Like I don't think I stop unless it's changed. And now, so it has to be sustainable. Like I didn't write a book to write a book. I don't think I would recommend that to anyone. I wrote it to see this culture change through. I think it's working,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's done. And so, a lot of it is like, if it's not done and it's another long game, then I might as well take my time and enjoy it and try and be healthy and enjoy my kids and be there for homework because, they need you and they don't stop needing you once they're older. In fact, they need like more headspace.
That's beautiful. Sustained ambition or sustained success.
Yeah.
That's something that we don't hear a lot about. Looking back, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Oh gosh, my 20, drink less. Drink less alcohol. Trust yourself. Do the next right thing.
Yeah.
The dots make sense looking back.
That's amazing. And if you had to sum up your career in 3 words, what would those be?
Understanding, empowering women.
Love it. Love it. And it's so, so true. I think just hearing your amazing story from the beginning of your career, you even having the guts to take a pause after high school and researching millennial women at the very beginning and now supporting us as we're in this season of our lives. You're definitely empowering women, Neha, and thank you for the work that you do. It's honestly changed my life.
Thank you.
The Careers Me podcast is a co-production of Career Slay and Wilder Plan, hosted by Kelly Poquiz Burke. This episode was produced by Michael Burke. If you like the show, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And are you ready to level up your career slay? And are you ready to slay and stay the career? Do you know when something gets hot, what makes it go away? What does a dog like to eat for a snack?
Slay the fear in career.
No, I have to say it. Slay in the rear for career. Slay the fear in career.